Hey guys, tonight we're sinking into the mud-caked, splinter-filled world of ancient shipbuilders, the forgotten hands behind humanity's first great sea journeys. Picture this: you're knee-deep in a riverbank at dawn, dragging logs through wet reeds, your arms already burning, even though the sun hasn't crested the horizon. Mosquitoes hover like curses. Your tunic is soaked, and not in a refreshing way. Welcome to day one. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing who's drifting off with me, and from where. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice? Shipbuilding doesn't start with ships. It starts with trees. Not romantic, build-a-dream treehouse vibes. This is mud, blood, and bargaining with nature. Your master, a leathery old man who smells like fermented bark, gestures to a copse of crooked trees and mutters something about grain structure. You nod, pretending to understand. You don't. But you're here to learn, and the only curriculum is pain. You squelch through the undergrowth, eyes scanning for the right kind of timber, straight, tall, with few knots and a soul that won't split when worked. If the tree looks back at you wrong, your master says, walk away. Not everything wants to become a ship. Some trees like being trees. Weirdly poetic, considering he once threatened to split your spine like warped oak when you dropped an adze. Once selected, the tree must come down. And this isn't modern lumberjack work with buzzsaws and hard hats. No, you're armed with a bronze axe that could pass for a decorative spoon. It bites the wood reluctantly, sparking a rhythm that will haunt your joints forever. Chop, splinter, duck, curse. It takes hours, sometimes days, to fell a single tree. When it finally cracks and tips, there's no cheering. Only a collective groan as you realize now you have to drag the thing home. Here's a fun fringe detail. Some ancient shipwrights, particularly in Mesopotamia, believed certain trees harbored spirits. You couldn't just cut them, you had to ask permission. So yes, before swinging your axe, you're muttering apologies to a tree spirit while your crewmates roll their eyes and shove reeds in their ears to block the curse. Superstitious, sure. But if you've ever seen a keel split on its maiden voyage, you start talking to trees too. The hauling process is its own torment. No wagons, just ropes, levers, and the raw optimism of a dozen half-starved workers. Logs get dragged over wet grass, slippery rocks, and each other's feet. You quickly learn that crushed toes are part of the job. Your shoulder develops a permanent bruise from the yoke. Your palms turn into rawhide. Back at the yard, if you can call a muddy clearing with half a hut a yard, the logs are stacked like trophies. You collapse nearby, panting, only to be handed a sharp stone and told to start peeling bark. Apparently, insects love bark, and rotting wood mid-voyage tends to sink even the most beautiful ship. Historians still argue whether ancient workers were slaves, paid craftsmen, or something in between. Truth is, none of those labels quite capture the feeling of back-breaking effort fueled by both fear and pride. You're not here for gold or glory. You're here because your father was. Because your mother patched sails when she wasn't mending fishnets. Because this is what your village does. As dusk settles, the river glows like molten bronze. You stretch your aching arms, already dreading tomorrow. The logs lie in wait, massive and inert, like sleeping dragons. Tomorrow, they'll become beams and ribs, bones of a creature meant to float. But tonight, you sleep on straw beside the fire, the scent of crushed pine lingering in your nostrils, the calluses on your hands pulsing like second heartbeats. And just before you drift off, someone nearby mutters the shipbuilder's unofficial motto: "If the sea doesn't kill you, the hull will." Your eyes open to the sound of coughing, wet, raspy, the kind that makes you wonder if lungs can actually splinter. One of the older shipwrights is already at the fire pit, reheating a pot of grain mush that smells like last week's socks. Breakfast is fuel, not flavor. You gulp it down, grab your tools, and trudge back toward the timber. Today, you meet your new best friends, ancient tools with the precision of a toddler and the charm of a root canal. Bronze adzes, wooden mallets, flint chisels and blades that seem to grow dull just by looking at them. No steel. Not yet. Not unless you're building ships for a pharaoh or a king who wants to outdo the other kings in the naval flex-off. You squat beside a fresh-cut beam, adze in hand, and begin shaping it into something that might, eventually, support a ship's hull. Bronze is soft. It glides through wet wood like a spoon through mashed peas, until it doesn't. Then it catches, splinters, or just shrugs and slides off the grain. You sharpen. You curse. You try again. This process is called fairing, but there's nothing fair about it. The workshop smells like sweat, sap, and smoldering charcoal. You work shirtless, not because it's glamorous, but because fabric just gets in the way when your body's already soaked in effort. The tool handles are slick with use, the edges irregular, worn down by years of correction and stubborn timber. Mainstream fact: Bronze Age shipwrights in places like Egypt and the Aegean used mortise and tenon joints, basically carving a socket and a tab to fit together tightly without nails. Imagine building IKEA furniture with no instructions, no screws, and no forgiveness. That's your job. You shape pieces to slide into each other perfectly, held by wooden pegs and the desperate hope that seawater won't ruin everything. Your master sidles up behind you, inspecting your latest attempt. He doesn't speak. He just hums through his nose, the kind of disappointed hum that would make a statue feel insecure. Then he walks away, leaving you to either cry or redo the piece. You choose neither. You keep carving. Oh, and here's a gem from the fringe files. In some ancient ports, toolmakers were seen as spiritual intermediaries. Their ability to shape bronze without ruining it? Practically witchcraft. You once heard a story, probably fake, about a craftsman in Tyre who whispered to his hammer like it was a lover. Got the smoothest keel beams in all of Phoenicia, apparently. Your own hammer doesn't whisper back. It mostly thuds and occasionally rebounds into your shin. And let's talk shavings. You think wood shavings are soft, gentle curls? Not when they're bone-dry splinters that wedge under your fingernails like tiny, spiteful daggers. Your hands become a patchwork of cuts, bruises, and calluses. Gloves? Ha! Those are for royalty. You get rope burns and fungus. Lunch is bark bread and salted fish. You chew while watching someone across the yard wrestle a crooked beam into submission with a frame saw the size of a toddler's sled. The rhythm of scraping metal against wood becomes background music, the heartbeat of this world. Your master calls for you. It's time to learn how to measure, by eye mostly, because rulers are for people who don't trust instinct. He hands you a piece of twine and a stick and gestures toward a half-finished rib. You're supposed to match its curve, perfectly, with string. No pressure. By the end of the day, your thighs ache from squatting. Your back feels like it's grown extra bones, and you're starting to talk to the adze like that guy from Tyre. The only thing that keeps you going is the communal fire, where stories are traded like coins. One shipwright claims he saw a sea serpent once. Another brags that his last boat made it all the way to Crete and back. You lie and say you once carved a whole keel by yourself. No one believes you, but no one cares. Historians still argue whether tool design spread by trade or was reinvented independently across regions. Either way, you get the sense that shipbuilders everywhere suffer the same way. There's a comfort in that. A brotherhood of the blistered. Night falls. The stars appear above the dark silhouette of the workshop roof. You lay your tools on a woven mat, careful not to lose the chisel again. It rolled into the fire pit once, and no one's let you forget it. You collapse into your straw mat, muscles buzzing, head foggy. But you're learning, you're shaping, and if the gods are generous, tomorrow your blade will glide true, the timber will yield, and your master will grunt with something dangerously close to approval. But probably not. You wake to the sharp tang of pine pitch in your nostrils, and the rhythmic scraping of someone nearby already at work. It's still early, barely light enough to see your own hands, but that doesn't matter. Today isn't about muscle. It's about brains, or at least about intuition masquerading as engineering. You're about to design a ship, and you'll do it the old-fashioned way, with chalk, string, and a healthy dose of panic. Forget blueprints. There's no scroll of perfect schematics passed down from some naval architect. No chalkboard equations or digital renderings. Just a few smudged diagrams scratched onto bark slabs, and a lot of experienced mumbling. If you're lucky, you'll sketch a rough hull shape on the dirt floor, tracing curves that feel right. If you're really lucky, your drawing won't get trampled by a goat 5 seconds later. You spend the morning bent over, outlining the basic shape with a charcoal nub and a string anchored by pegs. It's part compass, part cat's cradle. The hull's curve has to be smooth, not too deep, or the boat becomes a bathtub. Not too flat, or it wobbles like a drunk goat in open water. Your master crouches beside you. He doesn't correct you, exactly. He just breathes louder when you're wrong, which is, most of the time. Eventually, you redraw it again, arms stained black, thighs cramping, dust coating your knees like seasoning. The final result still looks like a sad banana, but at least it's a symmetrical banana. Mainstream fact: ancient shipbuilders often shaped their vessels using shell-first construction, starting with the outer hull before building the internal frame. That's the opposite of how modern ships are built. It requires a kind of sculptural vision, almost artistic, imagining the finished form as you go. It's like drawing the outside of a puzzle before inventing the pieces. Now that you've got a plan-ish, it's time for the framing phase. You select the keel timber, usually the straightest, strongest piece you've got, and lay it down like a spine. Every other part of the ship will hinge on this beam, and if you get it wrong, the whole thing warps like a soggy biscuit. No pressure. Here's a weird tidbit. Some ancient shipbuilders in the Mediterranean used lead weights tied to strings as makeshift plumb lines to ensure straight angles. One guy in your crew insists on using a dried eel, claims it points true. He's also missing 3 fingers, so maybe don't follow all his advice. With the keel down, you begin adding frames, wooden ribs that give the hull its shape. They're notched and pegged, curved with the same loving frustration as a rebellious child. Each rib is boiled or steamed to bend without snapping. You try not to inhale the steam. It smells like old socks and bad decisions. Every measurement is a gamble. The bow must curve just so. The stern can't jut too far. One misaligned rib, and the whole thing looks like it was made by drunk giants. And remember, you're not building a bathtub toy. You're building something that might cross seas, carry cargo, host warriors, or, sink majestically with 0 survivors. Historians still argue whether symmetry or asymmetry was favored in early designs. Some wrecks suggest slightly offset keels, either due to technique or because, well, life happens. You suspect it's mostly the latter. Ships get built by tired people making mostly educated guesses under bad lighting with tools sharpened on rocks. You squint at your creation as the sun reaches its peak. It looks promising. You run your hand along the ribs, feeling where the grain shifts, where the tension lies. It's alive, this thing. Not metaphorically. Timber moves, expands, breathes. If you don't learn its moods, it'll betray you. Lunch is late and eaten leaning against a hull frame that still smells like sap. Someone passes you a handful of dried figs and some crumbly bread. You chew slowly, eyes still locked on your crooked banana boat. And just when you think you've earned a break, your master claps his hands. Time to lash some strakes. Planks, long, thin strips of wood, must now be curved and fitted along the outside of the ribs. You begin with the garboard plank, the first and trickiest one. It has to fit snug against the keel and curve upward without gapping. You shave, soak, bend, refit, and then, because this is the rule, you do it again. And again. There's no glue, no nails, just pegs, wedges, and occasional muttered prayers. Every connection must be tight enough to hold water at bay, but flexible enough not to crack when the ship flexes. Wood on wood, sealed later with pitch and sheer audacity. As the light fades, you step back and see something strange. A skeleton of a vessel, curved and rising from the dirt like a sea beast frozen mid-swim. It's not done, not even close, but it's real. And somehow, you helped shape it. You scrub charcoal from your fingers with a handful of sand, wincing as it rubs into your blisters. Your back aches. Your neck pops. But you're grinning. You made something. And maybe, just maybe, this banana's gonna float. You're up before the sun again, this time with a splinter lodged under your thumbnail and a vague dream about drowning in sawdust. Someone sharpening a blade nearby, slow, scraping strokes against a whetstone that sound like whispers in the morning dark. Today's assignment? Find a tree. Not just any tree. The right tree. Shipbuilders are many things. Carpenters, dreamers, occasional liars, but above all, they're tree whisperers. You've learned to judge wood like a sommelier judges wine. Straight-grained, not free, flexible yet strong. Sounds romantic until you spend 4 hours crawling through a forest with beetles in your shirt, poking trunks and muttering about lignin structure. The elders speak of specific species for specific parts. Ash for pegs, cedar for planking, lightweight, rot-resistant, and fragrant enough to mask the smell of your unwashed crewmates. Oak? Excellent for frames and ribs, but good luck cutting the stuff without a team of oxen and half your patience. You hike up a wooded ridge with your master and 2 other apprentices, each carrying a copper-bladed axe and a hunk of bread wrapped in old cloth. The forest is still damp from last night's rain, and your boots squelch with every step. A bird calls overhead. You wonder if it's mocking you. Eventually, your master halts. He places a weathered hand on a tall, straight tree, something between pine and myth. He doesn't speak, just nods. The others know what to do. The axes come out. It's a ritual, almost. One apprentice circles the tree, pressing his ear to the bark as if listening. Another scratches a symbol in the dirt, part superstition, part habit. No one jokes, no one rushes. There's a respect here, even reverence. Some shipyards in the ancient world, particularly among the Norse and Greeks, were known to offer small sacrifices before felling a keel tree. A coin, a feather, a drop of wine. You offer your time and your back. The chopping begins, rhythmic and brutal. Sap bleeds from the trunk like amber tears. Chips fly. The sun creeps higher, turning sweat into salt trails down your spine. You take turns, muscles burning, breath short. When the tree finally groans and tips, the silence afterward feels heavier. Now comes the fun part, transporting it. Historians still argue whether ancient builders used log rollers, sleds, or dragged trees with ropes and curses. Today, you do all three. The tree is bound with vine ropes, hoisted onto crude rollers, and slowly maneuvered downhill, inch by painful inch. Every rock, every rut, is a chance to roll an ankle or lose a finger. You narrowly avoid both. You pass through a clearing where another crew's already at work, splitting timbers with wooden wedges and mallets. The sound of cracking wood echoes like bone snaps. You wave, trying to look competent. You fail. One of them smirks. You'll remember him. Back at the yard, your prize is stripped of bark and laid beside the others like a sleeping giant. You trace the grain with your thumb, feeling the way it curves, the subtle knots and whorls that tell you what this timber wants to become. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some ancient Egyptian records, nobles actually claimed the best wood for themselves, trees from Lebanon or Nubia, leaving the common shipwrights to scrap together what they could from local brush. Ship quality wasn't just about skill, it was about access. You start to understand why some shipbuilders hoarded timber like treasure. Good wood is wealth. The rest of your day is spent carving long, narrow planks from the new logs. You and your crewmates take turns at the pit saw, one below, one above, pulling the blade up and down like an exhausting, vertical tug-of-war. Sawdust fills your eyes, your nose, your mouth. You taste trees now, constantly. And when the blade binds, which it always does, you wedge the cut with dry sticks and pry it open like you're cracking a stubborn clam. You whisper things to the wood you probably shouldn't repeat in polite company. As evening approaches, a priest arrives. Not for you, he's here to bless the beginnings of a royal barge in the next bay over. But his presence sends ripples through the yard. Everyone works a little straighter, a little quieter. You sneak a glance at the ceremonial planks, polished, perfumed, clearly carved by the best team in the harbor. You nod, not with envy, but with recognition. They're shipbuilders too, just with better lighting. You finish the day hauling your planks to the shaping racks, stacking them neatly and marking each with charcoal symbols so you'll remember where they belong. They'll warp overnight, of course. Wood always shifts. Like people, you collapse by the fire again, your hands trembling from the saw. Someone plays a bone flute off-key. Another mends a sandal with leftover cord. You lean back against a support beam, eyes half closed, the scent of cedar smoke curling through the night air. And just before sleep takes you, your master says something soft. A good tree remembers the ocean. You just have to remind it. The air is thick with heat, and thicker still with the smell of tar. You blink grit out of your eyes as the sun rises over the dry dock, a sloped, scraped patch of packed earth leading into the shallows. It's where your almost ship now sits, ribs exposed, waiting like a patient on a surgeon's table. You're about to cover her bones. Today is all about pitch, sweat, and things getting stuck to your hands forever. Your first job is rope making. Not glamorous, but without it, nothing holds together. You take bundles of reeds, hemp or flax, whatever's on hand and not moldy, and twist them with a spindle that looks like someone's failed attempt at an egg beater. You twist, you braid, you knot. And just when you think the rope's done, you twist some more. Then comes the sealing. You're handed a bucket of hot pitch, pine resin boiled down until it's the color of nightmares and the consistency of lava. You use a bundle of cloth on a stick to smear it between the outer planks. It hisses, bubbles, and smells like a campfire laced with regret. You wear no gloves. You will burn yourself. Accept it now. Mainstream fact. Pitch or bitumen was used in shipbuilding from Mesopotamia to the Mediterranean. Ancient texts even describe the exact boiling process. It's sticky, waterproof, and surprisingly toxic, especially when it seeps into every cut on your hand and won't come out for weeks. Your fingerprints are now just smudges. You're also sanding the wood, by which they mean rubbing it with sandstone until your fingers bleed. Smooth hulls glide better in water, but they also require a level of obsessive sanding usually reserved for sculpture or madness. You scrape, you check with your palm, you scrape again. It becomes meditative, like trying to erase time itself from the timber. The work rhythm kicks in. Someone nearby pounds wedges into place. Another apprentice sings an off-key sea shanty that no one remembers the words to. You focus on a single plank seam, pressing in rope caulking made of old fibers soaked in oil. It's the ancient equivalent of marine putty. You jam it in with a spatula-shaped chisel, mumbling threats when it slips out again. Quirky tidbit? Some shipyards used animal dung mixed with crushed shells as filler and sealant, particularly in regions where resin was expensive or sacred. One guy swears his uncle used crocodile dung once. Smelled like a curse, but never leaked, he says, completely seriously. You try not to think about that as you handle your mix, which thankfully smells more like burnt tree and despair than anything intestinal. By midday, your clothes are stained with streaks of pitch and sweat. You're sticking to everything. Tools, ropes, other people. You have to peel your arm off the hull like a child removing tape from a wall. Someone pours water over your head. It turns instantly muddy as it rolls off your scalp. Break time. You sit in the sparse shade beneath a half-built sail rack and bite into a bruised fig, chewing slowly while watching two laborers argue about whether the rudder should be fixed or steerable. Historians still argue the same thing. Rudders weren't standardized in design until centuries later. Some ships used steering oars. Some had side-mounted fins. Others just hoped for kind winds and divine pity. The sun dips lower. The hull darkens, lines now caulked and sealed, pitch glistening like wet ink. You run your palm across it, feeling the smooth transition from raw timber to sea-ready armor. It's strangely beautiful. The kind of beauty that comes from sheer effort, not elegance, but endurance. Now come the lashings. Pegs and joints only hold so much. You and 3 others stretch hemp rope soaked in oil across the hull like tendons, tying it tightly to internal braces. Each pull creaks. You brace your foot against the frame and heave, heart pounding with every tug. These bindings won't be visible from the outside, but they'll keep the whole thing from exploding on the first big wave. A sudden gust of wind kicks sawdust into your eyes, and you blink furiously. Through the haze, you glimpse the silhouette of the ship, its shape now unmistakable. It's no longer a stack of timber. It's something. A creature with ribs and skin, ready to meet the sea. The sun finally dips behind the trees. The shadows grow long, and a few crew members light oil lamps to keep working. But you're done for now. Your arms ache in that familiar, satisfying way, equal parts pain and pride. You head to the edge of the dock and sit with your feet in the water, pitch stains trailing from your calves like war paint. The river's current is gentle, pulling heat from your skin, washing off the dust, but none of the exhaustion. Someone nearby hums again, off-key, but strangely soothing now. You look over your shoulder at the half-built vessel. You know every groove of her, every stubborn plank, every spot where you bled into the wood and cursed your choices. And you wonder, when she sails, will she remember you? The The sun rises, low and heavy, casting long shadows across the dry dock. Your eyes are still crusted with sleep when your master announces the next phase, joinery. The fun kind? No. This is the spend the next week shaving wood by hand until your knuckles bleed kind. Today, you're building the inner skeleton, the frame that will keep the hull from twisting apart the first time it hits a strong current. And to do that, you need pegs. Lots of pegs. Welcome to the ship of 1,000 pegs stage. You start by carving tenons, little rectangular tongues, on the ends of thick timber ribs. These need to slide into matching mortises, slots in the hull planks. It's a delicate process. Too loose, and the joint shifts under pressure. Too tight, and you split the wood hammering it in. And you only get one try. There's no undo button in ancient carpentry. You take your chisel, worn dull at the corners, and begin carving a mortise. Every shaving is a whisper. Every stroke risks disaster. Your master watches from a distance, arms folded, looking like a statue carved out of grump. Mainstream fact. Ancient shipbuilders across the Mediterranean and beyond used mortars and tenon joints to lock planks together without metal fasteners. Pegs, usually made of hardwood like elm or oak, would be hammered through the joint to keep everything tight. It was genius, and it was maddeningly tedious. Your first peg doesn't fit. Too thick, you shave it down. Now it wobbles. You remake it. Now it splits the plank. Third time's the charm. You finally get the tenon to seat smoothly into the mortise, and with a deep breath, you hammer in the peg. The wood squeals a little, but holds. You step back, victorious. Then you realize you have 237 more to go. By mid-morning, you're surrounded by wood chips and scattered pegs, looking like a beaver had a nervous breakdown. The sounds of hammers, scraping tools, and muttered curses fill the air. Quirky tidbit: some shipwrights would soak their pegs in water or oil to make them expand inside the joint after being inserted, kind of like a wooden time bomb of tightness. Others used wedges driven sideways into mortises to lock things in place. It was part science, part sorcery. One of the older apprentices whispers a warning: never reuse a peg. Reusing a peg invites bad luck. One guy tried it last year and his boat cracked before it even touched the water. Probably coincidence, but you're not risking it. You toss the bent peg into the fire. Each successful joint feels like a personal triumph. The frame begins to take shape, ribs arching inside the hull like a whale's skeleton. You can walk through it now, ducking under beams, running your hand along the grain. It creaks slightly when you lean your weight on it. Not a bad creak, a settling creak. Like it's waking up. Lunch is smoked eel on flatbread and a sip of lukewarm date wine, eaten with your back against a curved beam. You stare at the half-joined hull, wondering how much weight it can take before it splinters. Wondering if it'll ever actually sail. Your master breaks the silence. Ships aren't built, they're persuaded. He says it like a proverb, like something passed down from a long line of exhausted men with splinters in their teeth. And you believe him. Because at this point, the ship feels more like an animal you're trying to coax into cooperating than a structure you're assembling. Afternoon rolls in. You test each join by hitting it with your mallet and listening for the sound. Dull means tight. Hollow means disaster. You fix 2. Replace 1. Curse 4. Historians still argue how standardized these methods were. Some believe shipwright guilds passed down blueprints and measurements. Others think most of it was improvisation, learned through repetition and pain. Judging by the number of mismatched pegs in your pile, you're starting to lean toward the latter. As the light fades, You wedge in the final peg for the day. It slots in smooth. You don't even need to hammer it. You press your palm against it and feel the grain warm from the day's heat. It's in, solid. You sit back on your heels, looking at the rib cage of your creation. She's solid now, not complete, not pretty. But something in you, beneath the bruises and dirt and exhaustion, starts to hum. This thing is becoming. Your hands are stained dark from oil and wood sap. Your nails are chipped. Your back screams in protest. But the work today wasn't just work. It was precision, connection. The ancient dance of craft and patience. And as you walk back toward the firelight, shoulder brushing the curved interior of your half-finished ship, you realize something strange. She's starting to feel alive. Morning breaks with a stillness that feels suspicious. The yard is quiet. Too quiet. You've been around long enough to know what that means. Something big's about to happen. Your suspicions are confirmed when your master grunts and points toward the river. The ship, the nearly finished creature you've carved, hammered, coaxed into existence, is ready for the sea test. Your stomach drops. The sea test is part ceremony, part engineering trial, and part pure gamble. It's when the ship first meets water and decides whether it wants to float or die dramatically in front of an audience. No one ever says it out loud, but everyone's thinking the same thing. Please don't crack. Please don't split. Please don't shame us all. You spend the morning checking every joint, every seam, every plank that once gave you trouble. You rub pitch along the seams like a nervous baker frosting a cake made of structural anxiety. Rope lashings are tightened. The rudder is attached. Sails, not yet, but the mast is in place, lashed and wedged so tight it might survive a minor god sneezing on it. Mainstream fact. Many ancient cultures had elaborate rituals for the sea test. The Phoenicians, for example, often launched with priests watching, and sacrifices were sometimes offered to maritime gods like Poseidon or Yam. Even a cracked hull was seen not just as failure, but as divine rejection. You're not sacrificing anything today. But your boss did bring a goat skull and set it gently on a rock beside the slipway. Just in case, he mutters. You try not to ask questions. The dock's slope has been greased with animal fat and water. The ship rests on thick wooden rollers, each one creaking like an old man's knees. You and your team tie thick ropes around the hull and begin guiding it inch by inch toward the water. The whole town seems to show up for this. Children sit on shoulders. Elders lean on canes. A merchant even sets up a snack stall selling fig cakes and hard cheese. Nothing says naval engineering miracle like cheese crumbs in your tunic. The ship creaks forward. 1 foot. 2. Then faster. You run alongside her, rope burning your hands, eyes wide as the keel kisses water for the first time. She floats. Sort of. She tilts, rocks, then evens out, bobbing slightly in the current like she's shrugging off the dock dust. You stop breathing. Everyone watches. The priest nods solemnly. A seagull lands on the bow and poops instantly. An omen, someone whispers. A blessing, someone else replies. No one knows which. Then come the real tests. You board her, carefully, alongside your master, 2 rowers, and 1 guy who looks nervous enough to vomit if the wind picks up. You test the rudder, it turns. You rock the frame, it holds. You listen for creaks, groans, leaks. Water sloshes gently against the hull. A small amount trickles in through a poorly sealed joint, and you plug it with pitch-soaked fiber before anyone else sees. Crisis averted. Quirky tidbit. In some traditions, the first voyage was made without cargo, or even a crew, just to see if the ship liked water. Like it was a cat. Others went all in with a full crew and drums. You've gone for the nervous intern's approach. You row out 20 paces, then 40. The village shrinks behind you, the dock now just a smear of people. The boat feels different here, alive, responsive, twitching with the water like a horse waiting to run. You adjust the trim, tighten a rope. Listen. And for the first time, there's no creaking. Your master looks at you, says nothing, just grunts. But the corner of his mouth twitches in something dangerously close to pride. Historians still debate whether these early tests were scientifically calculated or just gut instinct dressed in ceremony. Some ancient shipwrecks suggest rushed, unfinished designs, while others, meticulously built, sailed for decades. Your ship? She seems to fall in the latter camp, mostly because you double-checked everything 6 times. Back at the dock, a small cheer erupts as you return. Someone throws a flower garland. It misses completely and lands on a goat. You step off the boat, knees wobbly, and kiss the ground. Not for tradition, for balance. The rest of the day is a blur of praise, questions, and the occasional back slap that nearly dislocates your spine. Children clamber onto the now floating ship. Elders nod. Your master disappears for an hour and returns with better wine than usual. You drink, trying to ignore the fact that you'll have to do repairs soon anyway. No ship stays perfect. But tonight, she floats. You fall asleep that night not on straw, but aboard the ship herself, curled against a support beam, gently rocked by the river. It creaks once, just once, and you smile. She's alive, and she's listening. The celebration's over. The cheering fades. The flower garlands rot. And now comes the part nobody talks about. Maintenance. You wake to the sound of wood cracking. Not dramatically, just a soft, dry pop as the hull expands in the morning sun. She's barely had a full day on the water, and already she's starting to complain. The river, it turns out, is not a gentle bath. It's a patient killer. Water doesn't just touch the wood, it invades it, swells it, softens it, coaxes out every flaw you thought you'd sealed. You once read that shipbuilders were cursed to fix the same ship until they died. At the time it felt poetic. Now it just feels true. First up, the stern post. It's shifted slightly, just a fraction, but enough to warp the rudder angle. You squat in waist-high water with a wedge in one hand and a mallet in the other, tapping carefully to reset the alignment. It's like chiropractic for boats. Nearby, your crewmate patches a cracked rib with a fresh tenon. You remember carving that rib. You remember the blister. And now, you're carving it again. Mainstream fact. Ancient ships needed constant care. Maintenance was often daily, especially for vessels built without metal fasteners. Water made the planks swell, then dry heat would shrink them. Sailors had to repitch seams, tighten lashings, and sometimes rebuild entire sections mid-voyage. You climb back aboard with your repair tools, tucked into a goatskin satchel. You crawl into the bow, dark, cramped, and somehow always filled with one angry hornet. You inspect the planks, tapping with your knuckles, listening for the dreaded hollow thunk that signals rot or separation. You find one. You sigh. And this is how the day goes. Tap. Inspect. Patch. Repeat. You scrape out old pitch, replace it, test the tightness of the frame. There's a strange satisfaction in it, like grooming a massive wooden animal that might eat you if you slack off. Then there's the issue of the captain, or rather, the new captain. He wasn't here during the build. He didn't lift timber, or caulk seams, or hammer a single peg. But now he stands on the deck like he owns it, barking orders at your crew like he's Poseidon's second cousin. He's not a bad man, exactly. Just clueless. Yesterday, he dragged anchor while docking and scraped the keel against submerged rocks. You heard it from shore, a gut-punching crunch that made everyone freeze. Today, you're the one patching the gouge he left. You mutter things under your breath, none of them printable. Quirky tidbit. In some cultures, shipwrights cursed captains under their breath during repairs, not to be mean, but to keep the gods from blaming the builder for the ship's misfortune. It's a fine line between divine punishment and human stupidity. Lunch is late. You sit on a floating log beside the dock, chewing on cold lentils and bread that tastes faintly of pitch because your fingers are stained with it forever. You stare at the hull, squinting. She's holding. But you can feel it. This is going to be a long-term relationship. Historians still debate how much of a ship's lifespan was spent sailing versus sitting in dry dock. Some believe ships were on water less than half their lives. The rest of the time, they were being rebuilt, repaired, or just slowly taken apart and turned into someone else's fishing boat. Back on deck, you help replace a warped beam. It takes 3 people to maneuver it into place, and it still doesn't line up. You shave, realign, shave again. You feel like you're building the ship from scratch all over again. And it's funny, this feels harder than the first time. Because now you know the ship. You've seen her float. You've seen her fail. The mystery is gone, replaced by responsibility. It's no longer about if she floats. It's about keeping her floating. That evening, as the river cools and mist begins to crawl along its surface, you sit beside your master on the edge of the dock. He chews absently on a twig and watches the water. "She's a leaky girl," he says finally. You nod. You both know what that means. The repairs will be endless. She'll never be perfect. But she'll work if you keep working. You return to your hut smelling of moldy timber and pride. You scrub pitch from your arms with sand, then give up halfway through. Some stains just become part of you. You lie back and close your eyes, every muscle buzzing. You dream of hammers, of slipping ribs, of being trapped inside the hull with no way out. And yet, when the wind shifts and you hear the gentle lap of water against the docked hull, your heart stirs. She's flawed, she's needy, but she's yours. The alarm comes not with bells or drums, but with shouting. You sit up so fast, you knock over your cup of river water. Boots pound past your door. A runner barrels down the dock screaming one word over and over, "Fleet." And just like that, your life shifts from patchwork and pitchpots to war. Your ship, your imperfect, splinter-gutted, lovingly abused creation, is suddenly a weapon. The nobles need warships now. Not later, not perfect, just floating and full of angry men with spears. The yard explodes into action. Apprentices stumble out half-dressed. Tools fly from racks. Pitch is reheated. Ropes are inspected. You barely manage to slap a new shoulder wrap over your burn from yesterday before someone's shoving a bundle of oars into your arms. No one asks if the ship is ready, because she isn't. But she's going anyway. Mainstream fact. In ancient naval powers like Athens or Carthage, wartime could call entire shipyards into emergency operation. Builders, rowers, carpenters, even priests were pulled into round-the-clock work. Ships weren't luxuries, they were lifelines, floating extensions of empire and ego. Today, your lifeline is looking a little soggy. You and a dozen others scramble to reinforce the frame. Ribs are double-lashed. Pegs are wedged with bits of boiled leather. The prow is sharpened, not for beauty, but to smash into enemy hulls. The captain demands a ram, so you bolt a carved chunk of bronze to the bow with rope and pitch, muttering that if it works, it'll be a miracle. If it fails, at least it'll fail point first. Someone passes you a makeshift shield bracket for the rail. You nail it on crooked. No time to fix it. Another team hauls crates of javelins and baskets of dried fish onto the deck. You grab a spare sail and stitch a fresh reef line with trembling hands. And then, as if the gods are watching, the rain starts. Not heavy. Just enough to turn everything slick. The planks become ice. Your rope fibers swell. Pitch cools too fast. You slip while lashing down the tiller and split your lip on the rail. Blood drips onto the deck. It blends right in. Quirky tidbit. There are records, especially among the Vikings and the Phoenicians, of shipwrights rowing their own vessels into battle, not by choice, but because who else knows the boat better? It was considered both an honor and a terrible, terrible idea. Your master's nowhere to be seen. You half suspect he vanished when the war drums started. Smart man. The launch happens faster than you can process. You and your crew push the boat out into the grey water, wave-smacked and steaming. The other ships, some only half-painted, others still smelling of green timber, glide out beside yours. The fleet forms like a jagged line of half-finished monsters. The captain shouts. You row. It's chaos. You're not fighting, yet, but the tension is thick as soaked rope. The crew trains in silence, throwing spears into the river, testing shields, retying knots with shaking fingers. The sails stay rolled. The rowers move as one. And underneath it all, the ship creaks. But she holds. Historians still argue over the design decisions behind ancient warships. Were speed and maneuverability more valuable than armor and storage? Why did some cultures favor rams, while others went for archers? You're not thinking about any of that. You're thinking about whether the hull will survive the next wave. It does. Barely. By dusk, you've returned to shore, not because the battle happened, it didn't, but because someone higher up realized this was a drill. A readiness test. A cruel joke. You collapse on the sand, soaked, aching, lips still bleeding. And yet, you're proud. Because the ship, your ship, made it. You wake the next day sore but alive. The captain even nods at you. That might be the most dangerous moment of all. Now he trusts the vessel. That means more voyages, more battles, more scraping the keel over underwater rocks because someone wants to cut the coast tight. You and the crew spend the day undoing yesterday's rush job. Removing the war ram, recoating the hull, replacing 2 cracked oars. You slip a joke to one of the other apprentices. Well, at least no one died. He laughs. A little too long. You glance at the fleet. 20 ships, maybe more. Most weren't ready. Some barely floated. One capsized 5 minutes after launch. Yours didn't. And that means something. As the sun sets, casting blood-orange streaks over the water, you wake with a stiffness that feels deeper than muscle. It's bone-deep, habit-deep. The kind of ache that comes from years of hauling timber, shaving pegs, breathing in pitch, and bending wood until it became something more than a tree. Your knees crack when you stand. Your fingers barely bend at first. You walk to the dock in silence, passing newer faces, young shipwrights who still whistle while they work. You don't whistle anymore. You listen. And what you hear is the gentle slap of water against a hull you know by touch. You helped build her years ago. The same vessel you watched float and flail and fight, and, against all odds, last. She's still here, the sails been replaced. The rudders cracked twice, and been mended both times with a mix of old bronze and creative cursing. The rails are carved with names now, crewmen, captains, forgotten lovers. She's become more than a ship, she's memory. A younger shipwright calls for help. You wander over, lean down, inspect the frame he's working on. His mortise is crooked, his tenons too proud. You fix it silently. He watches, impressed. Says nothing. That's fine. You weren't doing it for praise. Mainstream fact. Ancient shipwrights often worked well into old age, not because they had to, but because their knowledge was irreplaceable. Measuring by eye, bending wood by instinct, listening for faults by the sound of a tapped rib, none of it can be taught quickly. It's passed down, shaped. Like the ships themselves. You sit by the fire at midday, sipping bitter wine from a cracked cup. One of the elders jokes that your beard is longer than the prow beam. You counter that your beard has more sea miles than half the fleet. Laughter follows, rough and warm. Someone points toward the horizon. There she is, your ship, gliding home after another run, her sail full, her mast unbowed, her hull riding low with cargo and pride. You stand as she draws near, watching the way she leans into the current. Confident, familiar, still a little crooked, but who isn't? You touch the rail as she docks, feel the thrum of the mooring line pulling taut. You run your fingers along a repaired seam, one you caulked 5 winters ago when your hands were steadier. It's held, quirky tidbit. In some ancient shipyards, master builders would inscribe small symbols in hidden parts of the hull, under the deck beams, inside rudder posts, like secret signatures. Not for fame, just to mark that they were there. You did the same, tucked beneath the stern post, a tiny mark only you would recognize. A builder's whisper to time itself. You sit alone on the dock as the sun slips toward the water. The others haul cargo, clean sails, joke about the storm clouds to the west. You just watch. And breathe. Historians still argue whether ancient shipbuilding was art, science, or something in between. But you know the truth. It was life. And now, as the torches are lit and the day exhales, you let your eyes close for a moment. Just a moment. You hear water lapping, wood creaking, and somewhere, quietly, a ship remembering your hands. The night has settled now, soft and slow, like mist curling through the trees along the riverbank. The shipyard is quiet, tools stacked, fires banked low, the scent of pitch and pine fading into memory. You sit back from the story, the ache of work still humming softly in your chest, though your hands are at rest now. The ships you've built, those real or imagined, rock gently in some distant harbor, held aloft by all the effort, all the mistakes, all the care you poured into every curve and seam. Take a deep breath in. Let it out. Let the rhythm of the river replace the hammering in your mind. Let the groan of the dock planks and the rustle of canvas lull you. You've done enough for today, more than enough. The ship still floats. That's what matters. Your thoughts begin to quiet now, like sawdust settling after a long day's carving. You feel the weight of sleep drawing near, not heavy, but warm. Like a blanket of old wool, familiar and earned. And as the wind hums through the rigging and the stars begin to blink into place overhead, you know this. Even in dreams, the builder's legacy drifts on, carried by every vessel that dares to kiss the sea. So let go. Let the tide take you. You've earned your rest, shipwright. You've built something that lasts. End of script. Sweet dreams.